Okay. Good evening. Welcome, councillors, to the meeting of the Planning and Licensing Committee of the 7th of November. And welcome to members of the public who have joined us in person, and welcome to those who are following the meeting via Zoom. As always, please can those speaking ensure the microphones are switched on for the benefit of those listening online. And to members of the public, if you're only here to observe or speak to a particular agenda item, please feel free to leave the meeting once the item has concluded. Just as a reminder, speakers, you have 3 minutes. Unless you are the ward councillor, you have 5 minutes. Now to the agenda proper. Apologies. Do we have any apologies, David?
Apologies tonight, Chair, from Councillor Brown, Councillor Wise and Councillor Clifton. So we're voting to 9 this evening.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Corby.
Yes, Chair. Item 4C on the agenda with regard to, I sit on the planning team at Royal Parish Council, so it may be deemed that I'm predetermined in respect of that because we forwarded our opinion on this.
Thank you. Kylie, do you agree with that assessment? Thank you. Agenda item 3, petitions, deputation and questions. David?
Yeah, we have a few speakers on one deputation this evening, so we'll deal with that. And
deal with that. Thank you. Agenda item 4, we move on to the planning applications. Item 4 is report number 1642023, detailing 4 applications consideration. The first is 2023-0254 full. Conversion of the former White Horse Inn public house to residential use, including demolition of existing single-storey elements and the erection of a 2-storey rear extension, demolition of the existing outbuildings and the erection of 4 new dwellings with associated infrastructure. Just to remind you, this has already been part heard, so there will be no speakers on this application, and we are discussing the reason for deferral only. Thank you. Presentation, I believe, is being done by Joe. Thank you, Joe.
The application was deferred by members pending the submission of additional marketing information. An economic viability report was then commissioned and submitted, which considers the marketing and viability of the pub. These are set out in the committee report. It is acknowledged that the information on marketing is limited, but the report confirms that the Burley estate were engaged in seeking tenants actively between 2013 and 2018, but that no tenants were found. The report then looks into why this was the case, setting out what prospective tenants would look into, such as the costs of refurbishing the building, the history of the pub in terms of having several tenants in a limited time frame, the failings of these businesses, and the length of time the pub has been vacant. It also identified the fact that any operation would need to build a client base from scratch, taking business from locally well-established pubs. It also looked into market trends, including the cost of living crisis, the impact of COVID, and the general trend of moving away from going to pubs. The report concludes that regardless of marketing, the operation is not viable and that prospective operators would have had clear evidence of this. Policy CS7 does not explicitly require evidence of marketing, although officers often request such information, whereas there is no other evidence in support of the loss of a community facility. Instead, the policy relates to financial viability. Evidence of marketing is often requested in such cases, though, where there is limited alternative evidence that a business is not viable. This often takes the form of a brief report from a letting agent or selling agent, which sets out the extent of marketing, the period of marketing, and the interest shown, and the report would then explain why the interest was not pursued. Although we don't have such a report, the applicant has submitted a detailed report written by a national practice of chartered surveyors, property consultants and agents who deal predominantly in the provision of property advice, sales, letting and valuations of, amongst other businesses, pubs. The report also sets out in detail the reason why a tenant was not found, which includes the cost of refurbishment, previous operational failures, national trends and market forces. It concludes that even with additional marketing, these factors would preclude a tenant being found. And the report states, "I'm satisfied and conclude that with the circumstances of the White Horse Moorcote over the last 10 years, it would not reasonably have attracted credible interest and investment to enable its letting or freehold sale to a property intending its refurbishment and relaunch for pub trading." In terms of the addendum, we've received confirmation that the parish council have previously commented, and those comments stand. One resident then submitted a supporting comment. Councillor Johnson also made some comments saying that marketing has not been provided. It's agreed that little evidence of marketing has been provided, but the report confirms the estate were seeking tenants between 2013 and 2018, and that the report discusses viability and concludes the pub is no longer viable, which addresses policy CS7. The submission also states that a business plan was worked on in the mid-2010s and that the current figures ignore the potential income from potential accommodation. Officers' view on this is that the market has changed significantly since that time through the cost of living crisis, COVID, etc. And although we have no information on the viability regarding the provision of accommodation, there's a question mark of whether all the CAP buildings are capable of being converted, and there'd be an additional cost on top of the costs identified of bringing the pub back into use. The statement also said that if approved, it would result in the loss of the pub, which is against the wishes of the village. Officers' view is that whilst this is regrettable, the pub has been vacant for 10 years, and the viability report states that the pub is no longer viable. The final comment is about that once approved, the council may well receive an application to develop the paddock and demolish the pub. Officers' view is that developing the paddock is likely to be refused as it's beyond the village boundary, and the loss of the pub would be, or the loss of the pub would be resisted as it's a positive building in the conservation area. It's important to note that this application must be dealt with on its own merits rather than on potential future applications. I'll just go through the presentation just to remind members of the application. So the site location plan, the aerial view, and then some photos. One from the front, one from across the paddock, one of the facade, taken from Main Street. Again, from Main Street, showing a single-story extension that would be removed. Rear of the building, the outbuildings, more outbuildings. That's the access onto Main Street. The existing proposed site plans, the planned limits of development in the current local plan, and the proposed block plan. And that's an extract from the emerging local plan, which shows slightly more clearly the village boundary with two of the plots there and there, which, as we discussed at the previous committee, when it was heard, are beyond the village boundary, but are connected to the land within the boundary for access parking. These are the conversion plans of the pub. Few external alterations, although extension at the back. And then the plans for the 4 new dwellings. And just a couple of CGI images of the site. So policy is as before. The policy CS7 has been discussed already, which relates to the loss of community facilities. Design and impact on trees, residential amenity, highway safety and ecology were discussed previously. In terms of the additional marketing viability, information has been provided about the last 3 tenants. So 3 in the last 3 years of trading. And Burley Estate confirmed that they did engage in a number of discussions with prospective tenants, but no credible party or interest was successfully secured. And some of the issues of securing a tenant have been identified, that there are no available records of past achieved trade. There is public knowledge of the last occupier's business failure, along with the extensive period of closure. There was already established alternative public house provision, providing established competition. The local population is insufficient in number or size to support the viable pub. There's a national decline in the proportion of the adult population who visit pubs. The viability is set out in detail in the report, but it's estimated that refurbishment costs would be between 800,000 and £1 million. Given the small location of the village, travel by vehicles would be required. The locality is served by established pubs, and the pub would need to take custom from these, with the new operator needing to establish trade from scratch. And the report concludes that the pub is no longer viable. Policy SC7 states proposal involving the loss of the pub will not be supported unless there is an alternative facility or all other options for continued use have been fully explored and none remain that would be financially viable. So it does not explicitly require marketing. And evidence, although evidence of marketing is sometimes requested, it is only one part of the case that would be considered. In this case, information has been provided on the efforts to secure a tenant, and the detailed viability report sets out clearly that the business is not viable. It's therefore considered the submission complies with policy CS7. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Members, open the debate and questions for officers. Councillor West.
Thank you, Chairman. Carly, how much weight can we give to the developing local plan, which with the clearer PLD shown on that? Or
So
just to
I
who-
think in terms of the emerging local plan, no weight to it. But the reason that we put that plan up there, that was just to show a review of the plan limits of development. Actually, as you can see, the black dotted line is the existing, so there is no change in that area.
No, there isn't no change.
The reason that we put that plan in is just because it was a bit clearer than the other plan from the existing
Where
local
we
plan,
have two lines.
which I think if you're looking at the two,
Yeah,
that's why we just included it, so that members could be very clear that two of the proposed dwellings would be outside of the PLD.
what were our reasons for refusal last time? Was it just a deferral with a single?
Deferral. In fact, it was your
It
amendment.
was mine, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was just.
It was based on marketing and sales history. Yeah,
That was the only thing we had, wasn't it?
yes, correct.
I thought so.
Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, I've lived in this area for about 38 years, and this patch of land and this building is a real eyesore in the area. I live at Barradon, which is a neighbouring village, and you've talked about competition from other hostelries around. I've counted that actually neighbouring Morcott, there are 8 pubs, 1 restaurant, and a hotel, which is just about half a mile down the road from where this site is. 4 of those pubs in the neighbouring villages have got accommodation. 1 gave up the accommodation idea about 4 years ago, just before COVID, because they couldn't fill the rooms. So I think I don't think anybody's considered the demand for any accommodation. So I don't think it's relevant to a business plan.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Councillor Johnson has raised a concern of some residents that the pub could be demolished. Could it be written in as a condition that it is not demolished, and that it is preserved as far as possible?
We can't put a condition onto that effect. The application is to retain and convert. So if they wanted to demolish the pub, they would need permission to do so. the only alternative is to look to see whether it's worthy of listing in its own right, which I don't know whether that's been looked at in the past. But in terms of this application, no, we couldn't put a specific condition onto that effect, albeit it's quite clear from the application that it's pure for conversion.
But just to follow up, Justin, if they did come back with an application to knock it down, that potentially would then have to come back to committee.
I think we would have potentially limited controls over it with regards to demolition of the building itself. The main controls that the council would have for non-listed buildings would be for the way in which the demolition takes place. That is really the only controls. It's I think it's done through a prior notification process, but they just have to provide details of how the building would be demolished. Clearly, if they were to demolish it, then there would be, in essence, an issue for them, because there would then be no building. It would be a brownfield site, but again, it would, I think, limit what they could do with it. And certainly the discussions that I think we've had all along with, and certainly the agents from Burley, is that that's not their intention, and their intention is to convert the existing.
Thank you. I'll just continue, if I may, Chair. I would agree with Councillor Payne, because I know the building there, in fact, it went past it today. It is in a sorry state, and something needs to be done to it before it deteriorates even further.
Councillor Corby.
Yeah, I think I'd just like to comment, really. I think we've got to make a pragmatic decision here, but I think just going forward, there's many successful pubs within Rutland under freehold, and the business plan prescribed there by the landowner, I don't think would ever be viable. But there's a lot of successful pubs within Rutland at freehold with the owners running the pubs. So it's a shame in that respect, and it's a sad indictment, really, where we're going. I just would like to make the point going forward, if pubs do close and this viability issue comes again, that you know, put in a building for sale. That is the test in terms of potentially new owners coming in and taking that business on. I think the test of failure is not necessarily with a landlord that wants to put a tenant in and make a profit from that, expect the tenant to make a profit, and then buy drinks and expect specified drinks that the landlord also makes profits on. So maybe as an authority, we should just look a little bit more carefully, particularly with regard to CS7 going forward, and be on the case a bit quicker in the event that pubs close.
I think that's feedback that you can put into the Reg 18 on the local plan towards policy. Thank you. Councillor Payne.
To me this time, not you. Didn't sit together. I remember this obviously from the first time, and I remember the applicant said that they would agree to have non-gas heating in this new build, this conversion. So I wonder if we could put a condition on saying that, you know, given they've confirmed that that's what they want to do, that we'd like them to have certainly non-fossil fuel heating, primarily possibly solar panels and a mixture of heat pumps. Can we put something together like that just to confirm with them that that's what they're going to do, and just have a little bit of force behind it?
That be Justin, or can that only be informative?
I think the issue that we have with that in terms of a condition is we don't actually have a policy at the moment that requires it. And in terms of need, I think like you say, Chairman, I think you're right that probably an informative to that effect, although not binding on it, we can certainly encourage the use of that and do that if members would like us to do so.
Thank you. But can I encourage that feedback towards the Regulation 18 consultancy for local plan? Thank you. Councillor West, are you still looking to speak?
Yeah, I'm still going. I mean, I agree largely with Councillor Corby that there are really good freehold businesses out there where the business will succeed had the property been put up for sale, and that is the true test. I mean, we haven't we sent this back saying, let's see your marketing case to prove that this pub is not viable. And what we've actually got back is a bit of a wet marketing case, which isn't really proving anything. It's showing some pretty staggering redevelopment costs, which a prospective purchaser of the site might think, actually, yeah, they reckon that's going to cost £1 million to do that. Oh, I could probably do it for £250,000. They might be thinking to themselves, turn it into a decent pub again. Someone else might take a very different view on this site if that was up for sale. I've not seen any marketing evidence to that extent. I just do not like the loss of a community asset like this. And this is the final fell of the axe here if we give permission for change of use on this site. So, but I take Councillor Payne's comments on board, which are really interesting, that there are how many pubs within the 8, was it? And a hotel, yeah, in the neighbouring area, half a mile away, one of which has closed its rooms. And I don't really know where I stand on this, because for me, since COVID and cost of living is a transient thing, which doesn't really bear a great deal of weight with me in making a planning decision about the long-term use of a piece of land, because I'm starting to go to the pub more again now. I mean, we didn't go for 3 or 4 years, but we are starting to go out more again now, and I suspect a lot of other people are doing the same. So we've had a dip, and I don't want to risk making a poor decision in a very small dip in the context of a much bigger picture in terms of long-term future of a community asset. So I don't know where I am with this, to be quite honest. To be quite honest, Chairman, I just think, we sent it away a couple of months ago and said, come back with some marketing information. I don't really like what we've had back. Yeah, we are still here as members, and we still say, well, actually, you've not done well enough. Come back with something a bit stronger. Have you tried to sell it? No, they haven't.
Yes.
Chairman, I think the only thing I would say on that is that as Joe set out in the presentation, the policy doesn't require marketing. It requires a viability assessment, which is what they've done. As Joe said, we will quite often as officers try to push for marketing, because that is a clear way. And certainly where we've got a pub that's been in use, certainly for in the last 6 months, we'd want some evidence to demonstrate either why it's not viable. In this case, I think the thing is the building's been left. It needs a lot of money spending on it to bring it back up to standard. And it's been vacant for 10 years. And I think the issue that we have as officers is we've got evidence from the applicant. We've got nothing to disprove what they've said. And therefore, on the balance of the evidence that we've got, we don't think we can justify a refusal of it. If it goes to appeal, we've got to argue and say why we disagree with what the applicant said. And I don't think we've got any hard evidence to say so. In fact, I think an inspector would look at it and say, well, look, the building has in particular been vacant for 10 years. Where's your evidence to say otherwise? And that I think is the issue that we have. But I totally agree with members' concerns about the loss of public houses. It is something that we do have concerns about, and it is something that we would always try to resist. It is only as a last resort that we would seek to support an application for housing, like the policy says. In an ideal world, we want to make sure that it's either used as a pub or it goes to some other potential community use. And it is, if that's not possible, that we have to accept conversions.
Councillor Wilby, then Councillor Karen Payne.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I've got a head and heart thing here. The heart says we've got to keep as many pubs as we can. I go past that pub not daily or not weekly, but I do, and I see it, and it's a lovely spot. And I remember when it was going some years ago. But facts is facts. We've had the professional advice from our team, who've crawled over it, looked over it, and given us the detail, which is difficult to refute. We, at the last moment, have had an impassioned plea from our colleague, who is also the parish chair, I think, and reflects the heart of the village. But when I look at it and I think, yes, I understand that, and I'm in great sympathy, but equally, it has been empty and run down for so long. There has been no one coming forward. If there was someone coming forward right this moment with a, yes, I'll take it over, I can spend £1 million on it, bring it up to speed, it would be a different affair. But for my money now, I have to go with my head, which says we should follow the advice of our professionals here. Which their conclusion is there is no reason for us to not go ahead with the current proposal.
Councillor Wilby, Councillor Karen Payne.
Sorry, it's back to viability again, but you know, if we don't make a decision fairly soon, that building is in a serious state. And the longer a decision gets left, it's going to become more and more dilapidated and dangerous, to be quite honest. So something needs doing about it, and needs doing about now.
Thank you. Do we have any more comments from members? Councillor McRobb.
Just a personal observation really on the context of this whole decision, and a tiny digression to get me there. Some 3 years, I think, before the pandemic, with my wife, I hiked a considerable portion of the Welsh border on the Offa's Dyke footpath. And I'd done the same trip maybe 25 years earlier, and I was utterly shocked at how many village pubs had disappeared in the meantime. I'm saying this because I think I want to make the point that the loss of resources like these to villages around the country, and I would suggest that the Welsh borders is in many ways comparable to Rutland. It's a tourist area, it's pretty countryside, there are lots of small villages, relatively remote from large towns. But even before the pandemic, these assets were being lost to communities. And this inclines me to think that the hope for this pub to be a viable proposition, especially with the competition that Councillor Payne has identified in the local area, it seems unlikely to me that it's ever going to work.
Thank you, Councillor McRobb. Do we have any more comments from the committee? If that's the case, we now move to the recommendation to approve. Please go for a proposer. Councillor Payne and a seconder. Councillor Wilby. All those in favour? All those against?
8 for and 1 against. That motion's carried.
Motion carried. Thank you. We move now on to agenda item 4B, 2023-0355. Full land adjacent to 1 Water Lane, Ashwell, erection of 1 self-build dwelling house. Recommendation of approval subject to conditions. I believe Mr. Johnson is to present the report.
Thank you, Chairman. Just got the site outlined in red on the screen so that people can see where the proposed dwelling is to be sited. Ashwell. So this is Water Lane here and Oakham Road here, and sorry, I'm pointing on my own screen. Let's start again. Water Lane here. I've been on holiday, I apologise. Water Lane here and Oakham Road here, and this is where the dwelling's proposed. This area of land here is also within the application site, but that is for some ecology work that's required. This just shows the application site frontage from the road. You've got 1 Water Lane here, And you've got the listed farmhouse to the grade 2 listed home farm, which is just off to the back here down the driveway. Carry on down, so you can see the driveway down to the farmhouse that goes around. This is the site here off to the right hand side. Again, this is just looking north along Water Lane, and you can see the site is up on the right hand side here. I'll just flip through. These just show some of the properties and fairly modern properties on the opposite side of the road. Again, looking down, this is to the south down Water Lane, so you can just see the application site is in here. Again, looking, and this is just showing that the road, that the site is slightly raised up from the road level. And again, just showing the setback from the frontage, the large road verge there that is proposed to be retained as part of the development. Again, this is the site, and you can just see the bungalow to the side, number 1 Water Lane. Number 1. Again, looking across the site, and dwellings and vehicular access opposite. South. And this is just showing views from the vehicular access to the site. This is the grade 2 listed buildings at the back of the site. Again, this is looking north from the access point. It's again looking northern part adjacent to the private track. So looking back into the site, which you can see is fairly overgrown at the moment. This is again looking at where some of the ecology in a badger set would be relocated to on the application site. So in terms of the proposed drawings, they have been amended, taking into account the urban designer and conservation officer's advice. So there is a garage block, and then it's a 2-story but room in the roof space dwelling located, and you can see fits neatly within the plot, similar or comparable to the size of the plots of surrounding dwellings and number 1 to the south. This just shows the elevation. So again, dormer roof lights, try to have a traditional design and appearance. And what you'll see, if you note the gable span is more traditional on this, I'll show you one of the original scheme which had a gable span, which was not considered to be appropriate. This is just a street scene view. So you've got the proposed dwelling in here, and it's just showing it in relation to 3 Water Lane, which is to the north, and Water Lane to the south as well. So in terms of sizing, in scale and character with the adjacent properties. Some of the front and rear elevations there. This has been the front and the rear at the top. This floor plans. I'll just quickly show the original scheme, which the urban designer had some concerns about. The garage was attached, which meant to quite a large mass and frontage. And you can see the building was quite squat with overly large gable spans as well, which have been amended as part of the discussions. So the policies considerations are set out in the report. In particular, I draw attention to policy CS4. Ashwell's a restraint village where we would usually not encourage, or the policy would not encourage new developments. The site's outside of the plan limits of development as well. But in this instance, the policies within the core strategy are considered to be out of date, and the more weight should be given to the policies within the most recent National Planning Policy Framework document, which was released in 2021, and in particular paragraph 79, which basically put in some provision for it states that planning policies should identify opportunities for villages to grow and thrive, especially where they will support local services. And what the policy change in terms of paragraph 79 is where we've got a blanket in the core strategy, no development within restraint villages. What the more up-to-date policy thinking in the national planning policy framework is that you should allow some small sites, infill 1 or 2 dwellings that would help a village to grow and support itself, and possibly neighbouring villages and services as well. So that is the difference, and why the application is primarily at committee. Just the other policies outlined there. In terms of key issues, residential amenity, there is sufficient separation distance and no significant overlooking or loss of privacy. There's no highways objections to the proposal. There's adequate visibility and off-street parking. The design has been amended to take into account the concerns of the conservation officer and design officer. Drainage, there's been no objections from the lead local flood authority, and as I showed in one of the pictures, the site is slightly higher than the road itself. Ecology, there's no objections from ecology, but a license will be required from Natural England to relocate a badger set, and that is on the land to the south of the application site. Archaeology, no objection, subject to a requirement for some further investigation, and the trees along the side and rear boundary will be protected through conditions during construction. So, as I've said in conclusion, although the site is outside the plan limits of development for Ashwell, it is surrounded by housing on all sides, on 3 of the sides. Schemes well designed and would have limited impact on the character of the village. As I've said, it is an infill gap, and that the restraint village of the core strategy is now considered to be out of date when compared to the policies of the NPPF. And on that basis, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Sorry, before we ask the first speaker, which paragraph in the NPPF was it? I've just looking at the details.
Paragraph 79.
Okay, thank you. We have a number of speakers. The first speaker, can I ask Andy Howarth, please, member of the public opposing the application, to come forward? If you'd like to, when you're ready, press the red button to turn your microphone on, and you have 3 minutes from when you start speaking.
I am Andrew Howarth and I reside at the Hawthorns, 1 Water Lane, Ashwell, Rutland, a 2-bedroom detached bungalow positioned adjacent to the land subject to this planning application. Fundamentally, the land subject to this application is pasture land. It lies in the open countryside beyond the planned limits of development of Ashwell. This land has never been previously built on, and Water Lane lies within the conservation area of Ashwell. There is an active badger set on the land, and there is evidence that the badgers forage around this and on land to the southwest of 1 Water Lane, which is shown in red on the site location plan. Barn owls also hunt on this land. On the last planning application submitted in 2022 to build on this site, Leicestershire County Council Archaeology noted that the site is an area of archaeological interest, and any buried archaeological remains will be affected by the development. There have been 5 previous planning applications on this site, not including this one. Each of the previous applications have been of different styles and sizes of dwelling, and each one has been refused, citing as one of the main reasons that the proposal is located beyond the planned limits of development. 3 other recent planning applications submitted to Rutland County Council have been refused, as they too have been located on land beyond the planned limits of development, and I would suggest, with respect, these decisions should be taken into consideration when deciding on this planning application. For example, erection of 1 dwelling on land on Langham Road, Ashwell. It was refused on the 12th of July 2022. The decision was appealed and was again refused on the 28th of July 2023. Erection of 8 dwellings on land adjacent to the southeast of Main Street, Cottesmore, refused on the 14th of August 2023. And the erection of 8 dwellings on land south of Lodge Trust, Main Street, Market Overton, was refused on the 28th of June 2023. This planning application may at first appearance appear to be the infill of 1 executive dwelling on land outside the planned limits of development for Ashwell. But if planning consent is given, it will set a very important precedent that is likely to lead to further anticipated planning applications being submitted on land to the southwest of Walnut Water Lane, shown in red on the site location plan. The land bordered by Water Lane at its junction with Oakham Road is land owned by the applicant, a property developer, and is land also outside the planned limits of development for Ashwell. This land currently provides an open, rural and bucolic aspect when approaching Ashwell village from the direction of Oakham. With the brook running along Water Lane, it is most attractive and visual asset to the village. The approach to Ashwell village and Water Lane should therefore be protected and preserved whilst in the conservation area for the future. Ashwell is categorised as a small village and is not considered sustainable for further development due to its lack of facilities and lack of employment opportunities. In conclusion, I respectfully request the committee refuse this planning application due to it being proposed on land that is outside the planned limits of development. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the Speaker Committee? No, Councillor Corby.
Yes, sir. I can just ask one question. It's just come up on the form as a local, and locals tend to know best. Reading this, I've got a bit of concern about flooding and the ponding issue. As a local, can you give us any further advice on what that situation is? Because obviously flooding and water issues, drainage issues is of concern.
It does. Water Lane does flood. There is the brook that also floods. There's obviously the site is raised. There's likelihood of flood water coming off that onto the road. Number three Water Lane, they've got flood defences on their side gates. So it is an issue. It is a big concern. Yes.
Thank you. Any further questions? In that case, thank you, Mr. Howard. Could I now please ask Councillor Eccles, ward member for Constable and Ashwell, please. As ward member, I believe you have 5 minutes to speak from when you start. Thank you.
Good evening. I've been asked to be here by Ashwell Parish Council. They've written me a response. Ashwell Parish Council have a number of significant concerns relating to this application. The proposed development is outside the plan limits of development, and there is no essential need for it to be there. The site is not included in Rutland's recent call for sites. Granting planning permission to this application is breaking precedent, and in our conservation village, we see the principle of precedence as paramount. Ashwell is categorised as a small village of approximately 140 dwellings and is not considered suitable for further development due to its lack of facilities and services. Water Lane does have a high risk of flooding, and the addition of this proposed development with hard standing for 4 cars and associated turning space will only exacerbate the problem of runoff into Water Lane. Ashwell Parish Council note that in its latest incarnation, there were 5 previous rejected planning applications. I have them all here if anyone would like to look at them. This application has been entitled a self-build property. We have concerns that with less stringent rules on self-build properties, the potential for alteration, extension, and further development is significantly increased. Planning has been turned down already 5 times on this land, the last time only in 2022, which is obviously after the National Planning Policy Framework 2021 came out. All for the same reason as should be considered today. It is the same land. The proposed development is also adjacent to an existing bungalow with its height restriction. Ashwell Parish Council is of the opinion that the same height should apply to any new property. We entirely endorse the representations made by the owners of this bungalow at number 1 Water Lane. And finally, badgers. As you're all aware, badgers are protected species. It is noted that there are plans to relocate the badger set from the corner of this plot. Ashwell Parish Council questioned the practicality of moving such an extensive and long-established set. However, today there is an addendum which suggests that the badger set will now not be disturbed. However, the set is quite extensive, and Ashwell Parish Council would be surprised if it could be left undisturbed by the construction process and not interfere with the foraging and territorial boundaries or affect the badger's welfare, as badgers are known to have a hatred of change and disturbance. Even in the actual application, the ecology report, it says the proposed development could result in the damage, destruction of the badger set on site and could kill or injure badgers present. Ashwell Parish Council asked the Planning Committee to take these points into consideration as you conclude whether or not to approve this planning application, and also the precedent it will set in some of the other villages. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Eccles. Committee, any questions for the speaker? Seemingly not. Thank you, councillor Eccles. Can I ask now, Matt Taylor, the agent for the development? Mr. Taylor, you again have 3 minutes from when you start speaking.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, councillors. The council acknowledges the essential need to take a positive approach to housing applications which are deemed appropriate and deliverable. Whilst the site's planning history recognises previous refusals on the site, these are in the context of a previous planning framework, both at a national and a local level, as well as alternative designs and layouts. Ashwell is designated as a restraint village in the council's current development plan, but as set out in the committee report, the policies relevant to restraint villages are out of date due to their inconsistency with the framework. Therefore, whilst the site falls outside the village's defined confines, the site patently forms an infill plot and is exceptionally well related to the wider settlement. The officers' committee report not only sets out why the proposal is policy compliant, but also the applicant's willingness to work with the council to positively address any concerns raised, whether that be in respect of design, heritage, access, flooding, or ecological matters. The site and the proposal have been subject to robust consultation with statutory consultees. The design of the dwelling was carefully considered to take into consideration the comments from both the council's conservation officer and design officer, both of whom now support the proposals. And on that point, I would say that the site falls outside of the conservation area, but adjacent to it. The Leeds Local Flood Authority have not only reviewed the plans, but visited the site and found the development is appropriate, subject to conditions which the applicant agrees to. The council's ecological consultant has been widely consulted due to the presence of a badger set on site. Subject to securing a badger licence from Natural England, it is agreed with the council's ecologist that an artificial set will be constructed in the adjacent paddock, land also owned by the applicant. In addition, there are no objections from the local highway authority, the forestry officer, or Leicester Archaeology. I'd just like to point out as well, just picking up on some of the points raised, there's no intention to develop the wider land to the south. As been set out previously, that will be the location of the artificial badger set. The land is owned by somebody who has been a developer in the past, but the self-built property is intended to be occupied by his daughter, who is returning to Rutland. On the basis that the principal development is appropriate, that the scheme patently represents infill development and that all individual matters have been addressed, members are asked to follow the recommendation of their officers and approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Committee, any questions? Hans.
I see that you've made good use of the roof space for solar panels. Are you also proposing to add any other renewable energies like heat source pumps or anything to add as an addition to the solar panels, or are they just solar panels are just there for the electricity or also for heating? So
I think that will come down to the specifics of the build at the time. There is the intention, as you say, to put solar panels on there and yeah, get electricity from those.
Thank you.
Councillor West.
Thanks, Chairman. Thanks for that, Matt. Could you point out where the badger set is on there? Because I'm a bit confused. I've heard that the badger set is supposed to be retained, but now you're saying it's going to be moved. And we've got in our addendum here, it says that it is going to be, we're going to have an artificial badger set, presumably in this other paddock to the south. Does that X mark the spot of the?
That is the location of it.
Yeah.
Badger sets are protected, and so
Yeah.
we won't disclose the location of it or when it's put in, but effectively it will be in that pattern.
Okay, where is it at the moment? Are you allowed to say that?
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll have to go to.
I'll effectively on the site where the dwelling is, but
Right.
can't really say exactly where.
Okay. Okay. Right, okay, thank you.
So just to be clear, the badger set is moving.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the committee? If there is none, thank you, Mr. Taylor. Committee, I will now open it up to debate. I believe Councillor West, you're a fellow ward member, so is that correct? Are you not? No, you're Cottesmore, aren't you? Sorry. In that case, the ward member has spoken. Committee, any questions? Councillor McRobb.
It is only a question, and I don't know if anyone here will be competent to answer it, but I'd be interested in the answer if there is one. Councillor Heckles referred to the established fact that badgers hate dislocation and disturbance, but we're proposing that this badger colony will be moved to a new artificial set. I wondered if we had any information on the success rate of moves like this.
Chairman, I don't have details of the success rates, but clearly as set out in the agenda, the ecologists have been consulted and have advised that what is being proposed is acceptable to them. If they didn't think it was suitable or feasible, then I'm quite certain they would have just objected to the proposals. In addition, what we also have to bear in mind is that if planning permission is granted tonight, they would still require a license from Natural England in order to undertake, before they could undertake the development, to move the badger set.
Thank you.
Councillor Payne.
I'm struck by the fact that there's been 5 previous failed applications on this site. And I'm just wondering, why is this one okay? Why are we going for approval with this one? What makes this one so special that we feel we can approve it compared to the other 5?
So I think what you've got to look back is that 1, 2, 3, 4 of those previous applications were under previous local plan policies, so wouldn't take into account the new MPPF. The one in 2022 would have been around at the same time as the new version of the MPPF, but there were other issues, not just in terms of its location, but there were also design issues and things like that around it, which led to its refusal. Albeit the issue of being outside the PLD was, I think, attached to that decision, rightly or wrongly. I think that the fact of the matter is now is that the applicants have come forward with a scheme that's supported by the urban designer, the conservation officer. It's not in, as we've said, it's not in the conservation area. It is adjacent to conservation area. Boundary is runs down the road here, and adjacent to the listed grade 2 listed farmhouse as well. So taking into account the positive feedback from that and from all other consultees, that is why we've supported this one based on the MPPF changes as well. What I'd also point out is that there are lots of conditions on this one in terms of restricting further extensions and outbuildings. There are conditions in terms of surface water drainage as well. archaeology is on there. So there are lots of conditions to control, I think, some of the concerns that the parish have raised.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I have one question and one observation. The question is, I'm a bit confused about the plan limits of development. For example, is the bungalow, which to the left of the development, proposed development, is that in the outside or inside the plan limits of development?
So, Chair, I'm just going to double check. I think the plan limits of development come down the road here, like this. So I believe that bungalow is outside of the PLD.
So that was allowed when that was developed?
Yeah, I mean, my guess is that the bungalow was probably there when the boundaries were drawn.
Right, okay, understood. My observation is I happened to have a meeting at the Oakham Enterprise Park, so I went up and had a look at the site. And quite frankly, I think it seemed to me to be an ideal infill development.
Just to confirm, the boundary does go down here, along here, and then goes along the back here.
Okay. Councillor Corby, then Councillor West.
Justin, could you probably just help me out on this as well? It's looking at the our own policies. CS4 obviously is no longer applies with respect to PLDs.
I'm sorry, can I just in terms of CS4, the majority of the text within policy CS4 still stand. I think the part, and I'll read the bit that is deemed to be out of date, is I think the bit about restraint villages. The restraint villages are not considered sustainable locations to accommodate further development unless it is development normally acceptable in the countryside. And I think that is where the new NPPF has allowed a bit of flexibility and suggested that villages that might be less sustainable still have the opportunity to grow and provide for the community in small spaces such as these infill spots. So it's not the whole of policy CS4, it's that particular element of it.
Again, just for me, reasonably new chap to the committee. I'm looking at policy SP6 housing in the countryside with regard to development not being permitted in the countryside. Unless it is for essential need, agriculture, etc., or local affordable housing. How does this application sit with SP6?
Again, it's the fact that SP6 in essence it is out of kilter with the NPPF in terms of the NPPF allows some housing in less sustainable locations. So it's that point around effectively the NPPF now would allow some development in villages to allow their natural growth. So like I say, infill is what we would generally consider under that, whereas the policies CS4 and SP6 are very clear. Policy CS4 says no development in restraint villages, which is out of kilter, and policy SP6 is very specific in terms of it has to be for an agricultural need or an affordable housing element. And again, it's that element that it doesn't take into account the NPPF guidance that allows some market housing in less sustainable villages.
Councillor West.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question. We've got two plots here drawn in red, one with the development and one with the proposed secret badger set. Are we at risk of creating a brownfield site there? Are we putting that, are we making?
No is the answer. And in particular, the conditions in the addendum, the additional condition 25, which talks about the land to the rear of number 1 and adjacent to Oakham Road included in the application site area and identified for the location of the artificial badger set. shall remain undeveloped and shall not at any time form part of the residential curtilage. So we put that condition on to make it very clear that it's not residential garden, it's not something. I think we have referred to Plan B. I need to double check that. I think it should be Plan F, which is the one that's on the screen there. But we will make sure that that condition is very clear, that it's paddock and not part of the residential curtilage.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Committee, any other questions? Councillor McGraw.
I'm still trying to get my head around what the meaning is of the phrase planned limit of development. And I know that there are circumstances in which we approve applications which are outside the planned limit of development for particular sites. In this case, what puzzles me is that number 1 water lane, let's assume that you're correct that that building already existed when the boundary of the PLD was drawn. Why was that bungalow not included if it already existed?
That I don't have the details of that to hand. I mean, generally PLDs are drawn around to clear defendable boundaries. Albeit it doesn't always happen, as was the public house. We could see that it was drawn arbitrarily on a map and not very clear. But in this instance, I think it was when it was drawn, it was probably using the main roads and the rear of these properties as the main built up area, because that dwelling, it might have been quite difficult to draw the line round. Draw an odd line just round it at the time. I can't give you any more than that, really. That's my thought. There are anomalies where you will find, as I think we had the other day when we were at committee a few weeks ago, we allowed a similar application. Was it Rippingate? I can't remember exactly where it was. Might have been Pickworth, but there was a site where the main village was outlined, and then there were a terrace of 3 or 4 properties that were outside of the PLD, and then a big gap and another terrace, and we allowed an infill between that group. Like I say, they're drawn at the time, taking into account the landscape and things like that. But I think having been down there and having, you look at it on the plan, there is a logic to say that putting a building in that location is still going to be with, what you would reasonably consider the built framework. It won't look as a dwelling stood out on its own, encroaching into the countryside.
Okay, thank you.
If there's no other questions, I do have a couple for myself, if that's okay. I've been reading paragraph 78 and 79 of the NPPF and trying to read them together. Paragraph 78, in rural areas, planning policy should be responsive to local circumstances and support housing developments that reflect local needs. I'm not convinced paragraph 78, a executive dwelling supports local needs, and local authorities should support to bring forward rural exception sites that provide affordable housing to meet identifiable local needs. So I'm not convinced it meets that part of the NPPF. And then I'm rereading paragraph 79. It said planning policy should identify opportunities for villages to grow and thrive, especially where this will support local services. I'm not convinced it meets that, because I'm not aware of many, if any, local services within Ashwell. Whether groups of smaller settlements development in one village may support services in a village nearby. So that potentially could be the things such as the garden centre and villages such as Whissendine, but I'm not sure one property is going to contribute significantly to those either. So I just wondered your thoughts on those matters.
I think it's the way in which you interpret those policies. My reading is that planning policies should identify opportunities for villages to grow and thrive. That is a requirement, and then it goes on to say, especially where there will be so you should have policies that provide the opportunities for villages to grow and thrive. But then it goes on to say that especially where there would be support for local services. So the local services part is an added bonus, but it doesn't say that if it doesn't support a service, that you shouldn't still identify the opportunity for the villages to grow. And that is my reading of it, and that is my understanding of our policy team's
You
interpretation.
should
of
understand
that.
why it seems ambiguous. Good.
Yeah, I mean, what I think, what to be clear on is that this is one dwelling. It doesn't make a massive difference to our 5-year housing land supply or anything like that. What I think the policy in the MPPF is trying to do is to allow small villages where you would not necessarily encourage large market housing schemes or anything like that, to have some growth, so that there might be opportunities for people within the village to stay within there. There might be people come in from elsewhere, and that's where it talks about it might provide support to that village services, or it might provide support to wider villages as well. It might be that it supports bus routes, things like that, rather than local shops, because there will be villages that don't have shops and things like that.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions from members of the committee? If that is the,
Just one comment. Could we make it specifically minuted that we have discussed the badgers at length?
badgers will be included in the minutes.
Such that is, it
Will they,
helps
David?
to inform Natural England's decision
David has
with their,
confirmed that badgers will be
with
included.
their license. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? If that's the case, we now move to the recommendation to approve. Could I please ask for a proposer? Hans, I saw you first, and a seconder. Councillor West. All those in favour?
That's 8, yeah.
Against?
That's one against. That's motion's
And
carried.
no abstentions. Thank you. We now move on to item 4C 2023-0762 full. Mr. Philip and Mrs. Dawn Wilkinson, Belmsthorpe Lane, Ryle. Retrospective change of use of a single dwelling to 2 separate dwellings known as the Bungalow and Meadow Lane. The recommendation is to approve. Mr. Johnson, I believe you're going to present the report.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So just got the site outlined in red there. What we have on the site, and I'll just go down here. So this, you have the bungalow was the original dwelling, and then there was this annex, albeit quite a generous annex, that was built to the bungalow. And so now the proposal is to split the two off. It just shows the site. There's plenty of off-street parking, etc., around the site for this. There was also, I think, very recently, there's a cattery that is linked to these properties adjacent to the site that has had permission to be converted to self-contained holiday let, and that was approved December 21, but not implemented as yet. So this just shows the off-street parking, and you can see the bungalow. Here you've got the bungalow, and the this is where the I'll call it the annex. This just shows the a fence that's been put in between. So there's a 2-meter high fence adjacent to the properties, and then the lower gardens they've put in a 1-meter high post and rail fence to define the boundaries between the two, which is something that we were looking for as a condition. Just shows the residential amenity around there. The back of the bungalow, and you can see the steps down. The 2-meter high fence is here where the patio is, and then where it steps down, it goes to this lower level fence. So this is roughly where the 2-meter high element is, and then it drops down to 1 meter here. What we were keen to make sure was that both properties had adequate separation, residential amenity. Because at one point, I think they were looking to put a larger part with the bungalow and have an L shape, which was something that we were concerned about. We needed to ensure that both properties had adequate amenity space. I'll whiz through these because there's no changes. Effectively, the external and internal alterations are the same. The buildings, although it was referred to as an annex, were never linked. They were always separated by this carport. No external elevation changes. So main issues is the subdivision of the existing properties into 2 dwellings. It would in general be contrary to our policies, which restrict new dwellings in the open countryside. But again, this is a case where the NPPF has been updated, and in particular, paragraph 80D, which states that it says that planning policies and decisions should avoid development in isolated homes in the countryside unless one or more of the following circumstances apply. And D states the development would involve the subdivision of an existing residential building, and therefore it complies with that element of it. So although contrary to our policies, is up to date with the more relevant national planning policy framework. As I said, it creates an additional dwelling, no external alterations, on-site parking, complies with the local planning authorities parking standards. There is additional updated conditions in the addendum just relating to the fence in particular that's between the two properties. At the time we wrote the committee report, there wasn't a fence there. They've now put one in, and we're happy with the separation that's been provided. So it just secures that in perpetuity. So conclusions, although it's contrary to our adopted local plan, it complies with the NPPF. There's no external appearance changes. There is on-site parking that meets our standards, and therefore, Chairman, it's recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. We'll open that to debate. We do have a ward member. Would you like to speak to? I think Councillor Corby is sitting out because of being on the planning, so it is assumed, Mr. Wilby, you have the opportunity to go first if you would like.
I know this property well. I walk past it quite a lot with my grand dog, and it's fine. It doesn't seem to affect anything, and I have no objection to it whatsoever.
Thank you. Members of the committee, any questions? Councillor Payne, Karen Payne.
Do they have separate addresses, these properties?
As for whether it's registered with land charges and post office, I don't know. I think one is certainly called, excuse me, just check in my report. I think they do have, for all intents and purposes, because I think in the report it refers to them. Sorry. Oh, lost my place. Okay. So I think one is known as the bungalow and one is Meadow View.
All right, thank you.
Sorry.
Thanks.
Any further questions? If there are no further questions, we now move to recommendation for approval. Please go to proposer. Councillor West and a seconder. Councillor Karen Payne, all those in favour?
It's unanimous, Chair, that's 8.
Thank you. Motion is passed. Item 4D 2023-0862 MPO Langton Homes Limited, land north of Cold Overton Road, Langham. Modify planning obligations to change an on-site affordable housing planning obligation to deliver through First Home Scheme in relation to application 2020-0380 OUT and 1334 RES. Recommendation for approval, Mr. Woskett Burt to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so this site has permission outline and reserve matters for 18 dwellings, which was approved in 2021 or 2020 for the outline, 2021 for the reserve matters, with affordable housing secured by a Section 106 legal agreement. The site is coming forward. It is subject to applications for discharge of conditions. And within that time, the developer has been seeking to secure a registered provider for these affordable housing units without any success. They therefore submitted this application on the advice of our housing strategy officer to modify the Section 106 agreement to bring it forward as a first home scheme. And we, the council, have adopted a guidance for first scheme strategy. Essentially, as you can see there, it does fall within the definition of the affordable housing and the National Planning Policy Framework. The difference being you don't need a registered provider because they're sold at a 30% discount over open market value. So you're still getting that benefit then as an affordable house. They're reserved for first-time buyers only, and they also need to have a local connection, either working in Rutland or living or being a key worker. So basically, the first home scheme would comply with our current stance on it. It's just essentially that the planning applications predated our current stance for this guidance that was brought in 2022. The reason they can't provide a registered provider on site is that all the providers that they've gone to, they're all saying that they want these large schemes, 15 affordable units in order to make it viable for themselves. So with the housing on the site only being 18, 5 of which being affordable housing, there's simply no interest from registered providers. We've received an objection from Parish Council, fearing that there would be that the affordable housing scheme and the first home scheme aren't directly comparable. However, this is a legitimate way of securing affordable housing for the site. As I say, we've got that adopted now. And then 2 neighbours which objected to the scheme, bringing forward basically concerns relating to the planning application. For clarification, this isn't seeking to amend the planning application, it's the Section 106 agreement that is tied to it. So we do feel that it is reasonable, seeing as how they haven't been able to secure a registered provider for the site, to modify the Section 106 agreement, and therefore recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Committee, any questions, please? Councillor Raymond Payne.
I just want to put on the record, I think it's very disappointing that the people who we hope would be building affordable homes have set themselves a bar of 15 plus before they even be bothered to look at a site, because that's going to have a lot of negative connotations for some of the smaller sites around in the villages and close by, and bits of infill. So I just no, I'm very disappointed if that's their working rule of thumb.
Thank you. I think we all agree with that sentiment, but unfortunately, as a planning authority, there's very little we can do about it. Councillor West.
Thanks, Chairman. I'd just like to speak in support of this. I think it's great. I've got no problems with it at all. I think when I was buying my first house, if I'd have been able to buy an affordable house, which allowed me to buy it without having to live off baked beans and super noodles for the following 6 months, it would have been absolutely wonderful. So many affordable homes are for rent or they're offered through social housing. There are very few opportunities for local people to actually get onto the housing ladder themselves. And I think this is wonderful. I really do.
And we have no issue of.
Take Councillor Payne's comments on board that, we do often see,
And it's not.
which is why we see so many applications for the smaller developments with payments in lieu of affordable housing.
No, absolutely. But as a committee, we have no issue with super noodles or beans.
I still can't look at a super noodle.
Do we have any further questions for officers? No, if there are none, we move to the recommendation for approval. Please can I have a proposer? Councillor Raymond Payne, and a seconder, Councillor West. Shall we we're going a pair of pains, but no. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 6, any other urgent business? None to consider, I believe, David. Thank you. Agenda item 7, date of next meeting is Tuesday, the 24th of November. That concludes the business of the meeting. Thank you for your attendance. I declare the meeting closed at 8:20 p.m. Thank you.